So today is April 22nd, 2020. We're here with Nhi Nguyen and Na Tu, who we discovered thanks to the Outsmart magazine, and they're on the cover page of the magazine for their contribution to the Houston Food Bank during the COVID-19 pandemic, which we are currently in the middle of, and we'll definitely cover that shortly. And meanwhile, thank you so much for your time and contribution in the Houston Asian American Archive. We'll break down the interview into three parts, and first we'll interview Nhi and then Na, and then after that we'll do it with both of them. So Nhi, could you please tell us a little bit about your upbringing, where and when were you born, and the neighborhood you were brought up in?
Okay. So I was born in 1993 in Ho Chi Minh City, and it's in the south of Vietnam.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember when I was living in Vietnam, I actually used to live in like two different houses.
Mm-hmm.
So my first house is very poor. The neighborhoods, most of the people was working class with the very low income. And when I was around the first or second grade, my parents, we moved to a second house, which very close to the first house that I lived. And by the time I think the technology starts to growing in my neighborhood. So like there's a school, there more the internet. But you know, around that time it was still very poor.
And I read about your parents and your family have a sewing business back then.
Yes. So I think like they have been doing the business in fashion even before I was born. And what I remember they told me is that at the beginning, they used to make like some handbag or like bag or like the luggage. And later on, we start on doing the large quantity for fashion, and we export it to other countries.
I see. So mostly for export businesses.
Yes, export.
Yeah, great. What kind of values have your parents instilled in you during your upbringing?
I'm sorry.
What kind of values have your parents instilled in you during your upbringing? Like, what kind of parents have your what kind of values have your parents educated you to value most?
Yes, I think in the business side, my mother, she has more like effect in the way that I do my business. She always teach me of how to build a strong foundation before you can go further for any goals in your life, in your plans. You have to make sure like the first step is the most important step.
So kind of very kind of foundation step.
Yes.
That's great. And what brought you to Houston?
So I remember like when I just graduated at the Culture and Art College in Vietnam, I had a conversation with my cousin. She's living in Houston. And she asked me like, hey, have you ever thought about, you know, study abroad in Houston? And I said like, I never thought about that, but just let's try it. So I took an interview and luckily I passed the interview and I came to Houston in January 2016. And I came here. I always, you know, like I'm very into fashion, and I decided to learn fashion again at Houston Community College. And I think that's what brought me to Houston.
Great. And before that, you were in Ho Chi Minh City's Cultural and Arts College, right? Can you tell us about that?
Um, so after I graduated from high school, you know, like the education system in Vietnam is like after you graduate to high school, you take a very big like examination to decide what major that you want to study or what school that you want to apply for. And by that time, most of my friends, they had the dream, they had goals, they know what they want to become, they know what they want to do, except for me, because I didn't know like, okay, what will I do, who I want to be. And my parents, they're very supportive. They never push me or um, tell me what they want me to do. They let me choose what I want to do. So after my 12th grade, so I took 1 year off, yeah, to actually think of what I want to study. And the half 6 months of that year, I spent just most of the time, you know, like relaxing. I went to the gym. I had like 6 months off in my education life. And the last 6 months, I decided that I want to study something about fashion.
Mm.
But I didn't know exactly that I want to study fashion design. So I went to school, the architecture school, to learn about like drawing, like sketching, drawing.
Mm-hmm.
And while I was studying at that school, I realized that I want to study fashion. So I applied and I began my fashion education at Culture and Art College in Vietnam.
So before you moving out of Vietnam, would you tell us or share some memorable childhood memories or memories about your family, or the city, the neighborhood?
Yeah, so I remember like when I was a kid, by the time there was not much technology. So I always remember that my childhood friends and me, we spend more of the time just, you know, hang out on the street, cycling, and, you know, do some like sky flying. And sometimes like we just came in some store and rent some comic book and we share to each other.
Um, so can you talk about your experiences in choosing the school? Like you had, I guess, a number of applications, I would assume. Like, how did you decide to come to the Houston Community College?
Yeah. So my cousin and I, we actually did a research before I came to Houston. So we did a research of which school in Houston that has the fashion program. Yeah, and we actually found out that like XCC was one of many choice that has the fashion program. And by that time, it was also like close to where I live. Yeah, so we decided to, you know, take XCC as my first school to study fashion in America.
So did you know anyone? Like you said, there's a friend. Are there someone else that has influenced you, your decision, and have?
Yes, so that's friends of my cousin. Yeah, so by that time, I think he's were about going to graduate from the fashion major at XCC. So we talked a little bit through Facebook, and he suggested me that XCC, they had a very amazing professor, and their project, their lesson is very good for me to learn as well as try other experience in on the fashion competitions.
So have you joined any of the competitions?
Yes, I have like participate like so many, most of the competition that the school gave us. Yes, I participate most of them in and outside of school.
Great. Did you win any awards or?
Yeah, I won some. There's a very big like fashion competition in Dallas. It's
Mm,
called FGI, FGI Dallas Scholarship Competition, and it happened like every April. Yes, so so far I think I had compete 3 times. Yeah, 3 times for the last 3 years, and I won the best sewing award, which I won a industrial sewing machine. Yes.
that's great. So can you describe the circle of friends or the demographics of HCC?
Um, so for my circle friends, most of my best friends came from when I studied at middle school and high school back in Vietnam. Even though right now I moved to here and they like very busy with their work in Vietnam too. But we try to keep in touch with each other by, like FaceTime or Facebook or like just like text message to ask like, oh, how you been? How's everything going on? And at XCC, I actually like have meet and like make some very like close friend to me.
Great. Um, did you know English before coming to Houston?
I studied English when I was in middle and high school. But when I was in college in Vietnam, they didn't have the English major.
Mm.
So I actually didn't study or took any English school when I was study 3 years in the culture and art college.
See. Was there any culture shock when you came here first?
Um, I think the culture shock properly the language.
Mm.
Yeah, the language. Like I remember like when I first took like some ESL class at XCC, to be honest, I couldn't understand what the professor said. Because even though, like in Vietnam, we study like drama and writing, but we didn't actually have the environment to speak and to hear as well as to practice.
Mm.
So when I came here, I heard like conversation, like 80% I didn't understand. So it was a very tough time for me to came back home and study like extra to, do all the translation and Google on the vocabulary.
Yeah, I can imagine. So have you received any help from any of the communities or someone who have been most influential in your life so far?
I actually very lucky that I have a lot of my relatives, my cousin, my uncle, my aunts here, and they have been supporting me a lot with my like education or advice in the way that I do my business.
That's great. Are they also in the fashion and design industry? Oh,
No, I think I'm the only one in the family that actually into the fashion industry.
hmm. So can you draw any connection with first pursuing architecture and then into fashion? Because I would assume you need a lot of good drawing skills in
Yes.
order for both of these.
Yes. So at first, I like to draw. I like to sketch, but like I didn't know what's what's the difference between the architecture and like fashion design. So
Mm.
that's why I took like the basic foundation between the two major is about like sketching and drawing. And so from that, like while drawing, while sketching, and I just remember like we would grow up in the, like industrial sewing machine from my family background. So I thought to myself, oh, maybe like fashion is for me. So I try out with fashion and I think like, so far I think I love it.
So who are your role models as a designer?
As a designer, I think my favorite fashion designer is Zach Potion. Yes, because I love like his technique and on the construction is, it's look very difficulty. And I remember why I was internship with one very like popular local designer, Dow Chloe Dow. And I brought her up some of my um, idea or my question about like, how can I do this construction like Zach Posen? And she actually guide me some step, some technique, and I even borrow like a mini doll from one of her worker, and to practice from paper to fabric.
Wow.
Yeah.
So can you talk about the internship experience that you've had around in Houston? I mean, is that the first experiences in your career? Or
Yes. So I think I internship with Chloe around like 2017 to 2018, like around a year. So when I took my internship class at school, and it was very great. Like Chloe, she a very like sweet and kind and funny, like pause. She she taught me a lot. I have learned a lot from on the cutting, sewing, and especially like draping on the mannequin from Chloe. And more than that, I think I learned more the like business side from Chloe company. She gave me like so many advice of how to be successful, how to run merchandising or a retail store. So I think it was a very great experience that, as a fashion student, you should try out, you should reach more to any local boutique or local designer to work as a part-time job or even volunteer to learn more experience. It's very important to build your successful in a near future.
so what were the challenges in becoming a designer, would you say?
I think the most challenging is you have to stay balanced between of your creative and the, I call it like the real life. When we in the studio, like my mind, my creative is very flexible. We create something very beautiful, something that we like. But in the real life, we have to create something that the customer want to buy. So it's kind of like the two different direction that for me, I have to stand in between to make it balanced, to make my creative life, but also make like the profitable for me to able to maintain my business.
So where do you draw your inspiration from?
That's a good question. I think inspiration for me is it just come from maybe my life, like with communication with people I interact with through like on the like social images, maybe come from like Instagram, Pinterest, come from any like the runway or some like very full collection from famous designers. So pretty much it comes from, you know, like everything around me that I see.
Do you draw any inspiration from the Vietnamese culture or its fashion, like the traditional dress?
Um, you know, like traditional dress of Vietnam is áo dài.
Yeah.
And I remember when I was in culture and art college, we actually learned how to make áo dài. But like it was very hard, actually, like to be able to finish the neck of the áo dài is the most difficult part. And I actually don't take a lot of inspiration from áo dài to my collection that I'm working right now at XCC, but I always inspire a part of the Asian culture in anything that I do.
Great. So how did you decide to found Nhi Nguyen?
So I always want to have an online store. I always to have my business in fashion in America. So when I first came here, I think like every week, every month, and every year, I did a little bit research of like how to run a business. And like year by year, I have more information, I have more knowledge, and it's just, you know, like the right time for me to, okay, it's time. And I came up with Nhi Nguyen because that's the way that, you know, my friend here called me by my name. So Nhi Nguyen is actually like how American say my name.
Oh,
Yes.
that's a bit of cross-cultural over there.
Yes.
um, so how has the COVID-19 pandemic influenced your business, say?
So before COVID happened, I sometimes like pass by some alteration store to work as an intern, even back in the studio or even in the front store. So I have like a customer service as well as some tailor. And when I in the back, I have them like sewing or management on the work of all the seamstress. And after the COVID happened, most of the time that I've been staying at home. And you know, that's I think that's the time that I had the idea and came up with the mass project. Yeah, try something to help the community out there.
Yeah. By the way, we haven't touched this. Where is Nhi Nguyen located?
Nhi Nguyen is currently just an online store.
I see.
So basically, like, you know, the production is at my apartment.
Great. Can you talk about the efforts of fundraising through your sales of the 55 masks online, or you also call it by the solid masks? Maybe you can also talk about how you decide to name those.
So for the mass project that after the COVID happened, so people has more awareness of wearing masks as a tool to protect like themselves and others. So I thought, okay, maybe make masks, but with something new. So all the masks that I have right here is really like silky fabric, but also very like breakable, fashion and stylish. In my mask, it comes with like 2 sizes. Like I have like medium, a little bit smaller than the large. So customer will have more option to choose. And also I have a different color as well. Because, you know, like some girl, they like pink. Some men will prefer like just solid black. And with like every mask that customer purchase, a part of the profit will be donated to Houston Food Bank. And by selling masks is also a step to help me maintain my business during this pandemic, but also a way to help the community, give back to the community in what I can do.
Sure. What's special about the Houston Food Bank that you decided to work with them on this?
So because the pandemic, a lot of people, they lost their job. So they can't afford to buy food or they can't support their family. And with Houston Food Bank, they are very big help for people that can afford buying food. So that's why I chose Houston Food Bank as the place to donate my proceeds of selling masks.
We also read about some of the news regarding the disruption of the supply chains from overseas due to the COVID-19. Have you had any impact by that?
Not really, because most of the fabric and elastic I purchased from a local fabric store in Houston. So I'm very like lucky not to have any this postpone or delay by the material purchase.
Um, can you also speak about how the 55 masks and the solid masks were named?
So I inspired by, I always love like silky fabric. So when I pick a fabric, I just, you know, test out and feel a lot of different kind of fabric. And I decide to go with the like the satin fabric because it's very soft, especially for like sensitive skin, and also very like breathable. And by selling masks with the help of yarn, you know, like we want to came up with some like creative name for the mask. So we came out with different like packages and different set for a consumer to buy.
That's great. Have you made much sales and fundraising so far?
So far, I actually haven't counted yet, but so far we have sell like many masks, and we about to at the end of this weekend, we will do all the calculation and bring the money and go to the Houston Food Bank. We're very exciting to be able to finally reach to that step and help out the people that need help.
That's great. I'm sure they really appreciate that.
Yeah, thank you.
So in what ways have you found a sense of community in Houston?
I'm sorry?
In what ways have you found a sense of community in Houston?
What does it mean? Sorry.
Just wondering how would you call Houston home? Have you find any sense of belonging in Houston after moving here since?
Yeah, definitely, yes. Now I feel like Houston is my second home because I've been living in Houston since 2016, so almost like 4 years, more than 4 years here. And at Houston, I have met so many, you know, lovely people, very creative people. And at Houston, there also a very big Asian community and a lot of like Asian food too. So far, I'm very happy living at Houston.
Yeah. What is your favorite place to go in Houston?
We actually, Lanya and I, we love to visit museum.
Great.
So we went to a lot of museum in Houston, and even when we travel to another stages, like museum is always one of on the list of where we go to visit.
Which museums are your favorite in Houston? The
Uh,
MFA or?
my favorite museum in Houston is Museum of Fire Houston. Yeah, I went there a lot because sometimes we have the fashion show. It's called like Fashion Fusion. It's a fashion show that the program is connected between XCC Fashion and with the Museum of Fire.
Okay. Um, Moving on, we might want to talk about the fashion industry here and globally. I just want to see how you would consider the strong consumer market in Asia as a potential to create new perspectives on fashion, because with the more kind of attention on Asian designers as well as Asian mainstream movies such as The Crazy Rich Asian that has brought out a lot of like the models. Um, would you consider here in the US, there's a new standard of beauty and aesthetics?
I think recently like Asian we have like won and we have achieved a lot of um, like winning achievement, and also we are recognized more by the world, and especially in the fashion industry. As you know, we have a lot of factory or um, industrial company that located in Asia. And I think like Asia country is very big part in the fashion market. And for the runway, a lot of people say like they want to see more Asian model.
Mhm.
I think like that's a very good way that maybe like in the future we'll have more like Asian model to represent more Asian culture to the world.
Mm. So how do you think is the way for the Asian designers to have bigger impacts? For example, we had seen Michelle Obama wearing Jason Wu's designs. Like, how do you think people can raise more awareness?
I think it's still a very um, not a very easy way to get more Asian designer out there, especially to reach more like in the Western consumer. But you know, like um, the more Asian design or Asian designer um, attend or compete in some fashion competition, or even go in some like TV show, reality show fashion, I think like they will get more people to know them.
Mm.
And you know, with a very cool or beautiful design, it also will make customer, no matter if they Asian or not, want to purchase their design.
So, what do you think of the forces of the, say, capitalism? How does the money side work in the fashion industry? Like, what is needed to get, say, more marketing?
Um, I think marketing is a very powerful tool,
Mm.
but it's also um, a very, how do I say? I think like marketing to decide a lot of in important part in design, like where your business will go on. You know, like if you have the right marketing, you will reach more people. More people will know about your brand. So yeah, so I still like have working a lot on, you know, to improve the marketing skill for my brand. But so far, I think like I have learned a lot through all the classes that I studied at XCC, as well as a lot of research that I do on the internet.
Yeah. So how do you think the social media, which I think you have been primarily using, influence the fashion industry in general?
I think it's a big impact in the fashion industry. Right now, like most of every people, we have like social network. You know, we use a lot of social app like Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, or like Snapchat. And every time like we just phone down the screen, we see a lot of the fashion image in runway or from a famous designer. And it's the way to also educate fashion to people, and also a way for you to like marketing your brand. So yeah, social, you know, it's very important for you to build up your brand.
Um, so can you also tell us about your choice of your own fashion, like how you portray yourself, like your hairstyle, and say how do you choose it?
Um, I currently, my brand is focused on women's wear. And for me, myself, my style is very sporty and athletic because I work a lot. So, you know, I need to be like flexible. So I just, most of the time I wear like a t-shirt with a jeans and a little watch for my hairstyle, you know, something quick, and I'm ready to work.
Okay. Is there any role model, like a celebrity fashion style that you really appreciate?
I don't have a, a model for me to look it up, but I really like Ten French from Queer Eye, because he's very stylable and very fashionable, and the way his look is also very, you know, clean but elegant and super fashionable.
Great. Um, so moving on, can you share a little bit about your gender identity? Like, how do you identify yourself, and how are the kind of milestones or the steps that you have undertaken?
My gender identity is a trans man, and I just have started my um, transformation from February. So right now it's kind of like 2 months on using testosterone on my body. And, yeah, so far I'm so happy of, you know, who I can become today as I always wanted to be.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
Yeah. So how have you come to this decision?
Um, I think like sometimes like my decision just come in when I feel it's the right time.
Mm.
So a few months ago, I decided to came to a clinic and has a conversation with a doctor, and she told me like whenever I'm ready, just let her know, and like we can start. So like 2 months ago on February is the time that I decide, okay, it's time for me to become what I want. So,
Great. Um, so what were the challenges that you have faced during your period of transition?
the difficult time I think is letting people, especially like my family and my relatives, know about the process that I'm doing.
Mm,
It's not very easy, especially in the Asian culture.
mm,
The culture that I grew up in, like we don't share so many um, detail about like how you feel, like what you thought. So it's a little bit, it's was a little bit hard for me to brought it up.
mm.
So when the Outsmart magazine published, yeah, it was the time that I actually open and talk about it more.
Great. Have your family been supportive?
Yes, they surprised. They surprised because like during the COVID, we haven't been like seeing each other for like 2 months.
Mm,
This was also the time that I start my testosterone. They surprised, but they has been very supporting me on my decision.
wonderful. So have you received support from the local community?
Um, yeah, I have received like some messages from like LGBT community
Mm,
when they read about my story in the Outsmart magazine.
yeah,
So right now I have like make and going to meet more like new friends in the LGBT community.
great. So have Outsmart Magazine reached out to you, or how did that connection happen?
Um, Let me think. I think I think Outsmart magazine. Um, I think they found. Yeah, I think they found me through through New Win.
Mm,
Yeah, and then they reach out if I want to do interview about my mass project.
great. So going back to social media, so how do you see social media has helped in a way to be more attention to like social justice and LGBTQ rights?
Um, um, like like I said, like social media is a very important to all the aspect with the fashion world or even with the LGBT community.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's a way to connect people, like especially during this pandemic time,
Mm,
people will use more social media to contact with each other.
mm,
Yeah.
great. And lastly, I'm just wondering, have you had to face any like prejudice or discrimination due to your identity that you wanted to share?
I haven't have like experienced any like
Mm,
discrimination. But like back then when I was in Vietnam, I used to hear some whisper that they saying like, oh, is that a boy or is that a girl? So actually like I think like those whisper or like those conversation still happen a lot.
mm,
It's not a good way to think or talk about a person like this, especially in the public. but you know, like you can never change the way that people say
Mhm.
think. So you just have to change the way that you react to them.
Yeah. So how and what is the way that you have been reacting to those say whispers?
I didn't say anything. I just, you know, like they say whatever they want, you know, and I didn't mind their business, you know, like I just move on with my life. I going to have a lot of things to do, and I know I'm going to be very successful. So I think that's the more important thing than care about what they say.
Great. And how about during the COVID-19? We've been seeing more like targeted racism, like the current president's calling this the China virus and the Kung flu. Um, have you experienced any, say, similar targets during the pandemic?
Um, for myself, I haven't
Mm,
experienced any, you know, those kind, but I read a lot of newspaper that a lot of like Asian community, they
mm,
had affected by being racist of like, you know, like people think that like Asian people is the one that who brought the virus in US. So I think it's what a bad way to call it is the Chinese virus because it make people thought the way that they shouldn't, and which is not right for the Asian community.
great. Yeah, that's the bottom of my questions for you. Maybe next we can move on to Nia, if
Okay.
that's okay. Yeah, I'll let you take a break. Thank you. Yeah, well, thank you, Nia, for joining us. And it's very, yeah, it's very appreciated that you're taking your time out.
Thank
Um,
you.
yeah. So can you start by telling us about your upbringing and your childhood memories?
Yeah, I was born in Vietnam as well. I was born in a different part in Dalat. Um, my family and I moved to the United States, I think in 2004. So I grew up here in the United States, and childhood wise, I think most of my memories are actually from here. I don't remember too much from my upbringing in Vietnam, but I do remember the old house that we used to live in, and the communities there, the parks that I used to go to in Vietnam, and those were the ones that stood out in my mind because they were really happy memories.
I see. So, did you say you were born here or in Vietnam?
In Vietnam,
Vietnam. And when did you move here
I
to the
moved
U.S.?
here in 2004. I actually moved to a different state before moving to Houston.
Right, right. Um, so, can you describe the neighborhood that you were brought up in?
In Vietnam,
Yes. Or
uh,
if you remember, or here in the U.S.
I remember that we lived, I think, far from the main street. You had to go down an alley that would eventually split into smaller alleys. And I remember, in Vietnam, you would use the motorbikes to get everywhere. So I remember my dad or my sisters would have to walk the motorbike up this tiny hill to get to where our house was. And the house was located in one of the small alleys, and it was just a row of houses. I remember the house that we had back then it was a smaller house. I can't remember if we had one or two stories, but I remember that we had a big, big backyard. My parents loved to garden, so back there was, all the trees that you can imagine, and it was very green, very beautiful back there.
And did you move to the US with your parents?
Yes, my whole family moved in 2004. We moved to be closer to my grandparents who were here first.
I see. And what was the reason for the move?
I guess we just my parents wanted to give us better opportunities. You know, my grandparents had been living in the US for, um, I want to say 5 to 10 years at that point. So they knew that there was so many options for us as children that maybe we wouldn't be able to access from Vietnam.
Do you have any siblings? And
Yes, I have two older sisters. Um, and one of them lives here in Houston, and the other one lives in Maryland.
just wondering, since you're more like kind of more spent longer years in America, and your parents were more like first generation, do you see any cultural gap between you and your parents?
Yeah, for sure. I think there's still a big cultural difference. My parents, they spent the majority of their lives in Vietnam, you know, so it has a big impact on them. They still hold on to very traditional beliefs, but I'm really appreciative of them because they've, um, I guess the word is probably assimilate to the Western culture a lot more. They're very understanding and pretty open to the culture here in the West.
Hmm. So what kind of traditional values that, like Vietnamese values that your parents have brought you up to treasure?
They, I think with all Asian parents, they value hard work. They believe that you have to earn everything you have. Um, they also believe that, you know, family comes first. And that's those two values for me as well has always been top priority.
Great. Um, so can you tell us about your education experiences? I read about you first had a degree in University of Iowa.
Yes. I started off in college at the University of Iowa. Actually, before I was at the University of Iowa, I started at Iowa State University, which is another school. I started off with a major in graphic design.
Mm-hmm.
Eventually, it wasn't the right fit, so I switched over to a science-based major at the University of Iowa, where I kind of went into health sciences.
Mm-hmm.
Um, After about 1 or 2 years there, I moved down to Houston, where I pursued my nursing degree.
Great. So what have been your favorite subjects in your educations that, or has it led to health sciences?
Um, I guess I guess I would have to say anatomy and physiology. I remember it was one of the hardest courses in school, and everybody was dreading it. However, it was a good challenge because you had at one point we had to memorize all the bones in the body, and it was just something so difficult that I challenged myself to do it. And at that point, I could do it, but now, if you ask me, I probably couldn't.
Um, so can you also share some experiences about studying at the UT Health Sciences?
Yeah, I signed up for the Pacesetter program, which is a 15-month continuous program to basically graduate with a bachelor's degree. It was very, very intense. It was one of the most difficult things I've ever had to do, but you know, I made it through, and it was such a good learning experience. It was, you know, learning all the time. You had to learn so many different ideas and how to work together with your peers. And during school, we also got opportunities to um, work in the local hospitals and the medical center. Um, and it was an amazing experience because the Texas Medical Center is such a huge um, center for care in the United States, and you got to see all sorts of people, all sorts of patients, and wonderful healthcare workers.
So, are you living in Houston? Do you have any family besides live in Houston?
I have a sister. My middle sister also lives and works in Houston. My parents are still in Iowa, where we first moved to. So she's my only family right now.
Um, so, um, how did you lead to a career to nursing?
I don't think it was something I ever thought I would do. I honestly, both of my sisters went for the health-based careers, and I thought I would be the one to do the opposite.
Mm-hmm.
But eventually, I found that it was most compatible with who I was and what I wanted to do.
Mm-hmm.
So I think a lot of people think that you have to choose a career that will make you happy all the time, but I think it's more of a career that is worth doing and something that you feel good about what you're doing.
So, what aspects of nursing that you think is worth doing?
I think the advocating for my patients.
Mm.
A lot of times when I see patients, they don't know what's going on, and they're not, if especially if it's their first time in the hospital, they don't know what to expect, how things work, what the doctors do, what I do as a nurse. So I try my best to educate them with everything I do about how the process is and what we can do for them. And I use my knowledge to kind of fight for them when sometimes things should be done, but they don't always get done.
Yeah. So, besides your sisters, who are your role models, or who are the people who influenced you to get into this career?
I guess my friends, I've made friends through school and through work that encourage me to do what I do every day. It's a lot of people say, nursing is a hard job and it takes a special kind of person to do it. So I kind of attribute that to my support system, my friends, my family. They kind of encourage me to keep doing what I do because it makes such an impact for me.
Mm. And what are the challenges in your job?
Challenges, there's a lot of different personalities that I work with. Sometimes when patients are very, very sick, they're not at their best. They don't act logically because of the disease process, for example. So it's kind of hard to communicate with them when that is the case.
Mm. And so is that the moments that it would get pretty stressful?
Yeah, I would say so. I think communication is very important. So when you're not able to communicate with your patients effectively, sometimes it does lead to stress. But I find that family members of those patients are very helpful. They'll work with you. They also want to see their family member improve. So we kind of just spend a little bit more time to reach out to those people and see if we can get clear answers and help the patient cooperate with us, for example.
So is there a specific kind of patients that you work with, or is in general any patient?
I work with a lot of older adults.
Mhm.
I would say like 40 plus years. A lot of our patients also have long-standing history of heart problems. But we see a good variety. There's a lot of disease processes that we see on our floor.
Mm. So during the current pandemic, do you have to deal with any COVID-19 patients?
I actually have. At one point, for a short period, I got a chance to work with patients that were suspected for COVID or positive for COVID. So that was definitely something to adapt to. Um, I know that during that time, personally, I saw that there was a lot of changes going on
Mm.
to our healthcare system and to how we care for patients. Um, as with anything, I think adjusting to it was the biggest challenge.
Can you share us those experiences of changes, or I mean, if you can share?
I think just to speak broadly, because um, just to speak broadly, there were policy changes within the hospital to accommodate, those patients and policies that help protect us as workers as well, so that we're not putting ourselves in unnecessary, risky situations.
So yeah, we've all read about all these PPE shortages and all these people who actually haven't graduated fully from their degree are actually taken to the front line for help because of the shortages. Um,
Yes.
that has also been something you've been witnessing.
I haven't witnessed it personally in my hospital, but I have also kept up with the news about that. In other states, I know that they've been kind of waiving the requirements for licensure so that we have more nurses to assist
Mm.
in care of those patients. But I know that even before you're fully licensed or before you take the examination, some states do allow for nurses to practice like
Mm.
post graduation. So I think it's just an extension of that.
Mm. So can you also share some stories, like inspiring stories or memorable experiences that you want to share during this pandemic?
Yeah, I think the number one thing I've noticed is that the people that I work with, are very good at working together and supporting each other. During COVID, I'm responsible for a certain amount of patients, and we work like a mini team within the unit that we're on. Um, Due to the restrictions and for safety purposes, only the nurses who are taking care of the COVID patients are able to go into those rooms. So, for example, if you're in your PPE and you need a certain type of equipment that you don't already have in the room, I would call my fellow coworkers and they would kind of pass that equipment into me so I don't have to gown up and waste PPE. So I think that's the biggest thing, working together to get everyone through this hard time, because it truly is.
Um, did you have to witness any of the patient like leaving?
Oh yes, for sure. We've discharged several patients to self quarantine, and that way they can recover at home. Fortunately, most of the people we saw had very mild symptoms, so they are able to go home and just take plenty of rest.
Yeah. Great. How about have you witnessed any of the patients passing away?
I have not. The unit that I work on is not intensive care.
Mhm.
So we fortunately see a lot of patients who are relatively stable.
So when you come back from work, do you have to have a certain procedure that you follow in order to protect yourself and your loved ones?
Yeah, when I was taking care of the COVID patients, I would wash my hands very, very thoroughly before I go home. I try not to touch anything that I use during that day before I go home. So I just kind of leave it all at work. And when I come home, I also wash my hands again, make sure that I try not to bring anything home.
Well, thank you so much for the sharing that very special experiences. You're actually one of our first interviewees who are actually on the front line and making all those sacrifices and providing all the help that we all need. Thank you.
Mhm.
So coming to Houston, like what kind of community are you involved in?
I guess I'm somewhat involved in the community of nurses here in Houston. I try to keep up with my friends who have graduated and gone to other hospitals to work. I've also spoken with them about their experiences with the pandemic and COVID-19 and all that. So it's very interesting to hear what everyone's experiences are like.
Yeah. So how about your sisters? Do they, do they also have to help on the front line as healthcare workers?
Yes. One of my sisters work as a pharmacist. Fortunately, she is able to work from home, helping, you know, with what she does. And my other sister works for a company that does research for like medicine and approves research and all that. So I understand, we're all fortunate enough to have our jobs still and to be able to contribute in any way we can to help find out more about COVID and how to stop it.
I've always heard like for the past few months, like how unprecedented this has been. And is that something that you would also agree? Like,
Yes, for sure. For a lot of people, it's losing their job for the first time that they thought was stable. And, the economy, we've seen a lot of changes there. Our stocks have fallen, people are losing faith in how stable our economy is and how it's able to grow. And even in the medical system, we're almost we're changing policies almost daily. At one point we were changing it hourly because we were still behind on all the information on COVID, so we didn't know what was best practice. So it's been a lot of changes. So I think everyone's stressed out about that, and it's at such a big scale, like a global scale, that we've never seen before.
So have you also been helping with the 55 mask making?
I've had a very small part to play with that. I think when we had the idea, I was supportive, because I wanted to see and be successful and to strive as well. Working from home is a struggle, you know, to be confined to your home every day. But the mask making project, I think it's such a great idea because, as you brought up, the PPE shortage is still very relevant. I see a lot of just regular people walking around with supplies that, you know, sometimes I think that we could use in the hospitals. And sometimes it worries me that we don't have enough because we have no choice but to be in close contact with positive patients sometimes. And with the masks, I think donating to the food bank is a great step because food is like a basic necessity, you know, for everyone. And I think it's something that no one should have to worry that much about.
That's great. So how do you see this will change our lives after the pandemic is over? Fingers crossed.
I hope the changes we see during this pandemic will hopefully extend to years ahead. You know, the things we learn about making sacrifices and prioritizing the important things, as well as working together as a nation. I think if we can maintain that and use that in the future, um, everything will be a lot smoother.
um, Also, I've asked this to Neve before too. Like, have you experienced any prejudice or negative responses for being Asian American in the country during the pandemic?
Yeah, I don't think either of us have experienced it personally, which is something we're both grateful for. I know that there's a lot of it going on in our community. Even here in Houston, the other day I was reading about an article about one of the restaurants that we actually go to. They got they were vandalized
Oh.
in the middle of COVID. So I think it's definitely a big problem.
Mhm. Um, so moving on to gender identity, can you also share some like progress or how do you identify yourself?
I identify as female. I um, I am a part of the LGBTQ community. I think when I came out to my family and my friends, it was also a challenge. As with anything, I I think that my family was supportive. You know, they prioritized family over everything. So I was thankful for that. It was definitely something new though, as new to it myself and kind of discovering it and accepting it myself. I'm still getting used to it every day, I think.
Yeah. So what were their biggest challenges?
Biggest challenges was I think getting enough courage to say it out loud to my family.
Mm,
Um, I think I was just so worried about what I think they would say that it kept me from actually saying it out loud and see what would happen.
mm. So how has the LGBTQ community differ in Iowa and Houston?
At the time that I was living in Iowa, I wasn't very aware of it myself, of my sexuality and my preferences. So I'm not too aware of the community there. But once I moved to Houston and I kind of was more open to reaching out to different people, I saw that the community here in Houston is it's big, and everyone's very supportive. There's different centers for LGBTQ youth and for their health. I know in Iowa there's also a big celebration every year during the summer. I think Iowa in general is pretty accepting of LGBTQ people as well.
Yeah, I learned about there's besides Outsmart magazine, there's also the Mantra Center. Are you guys part of that?
We're not actively involved, but we've been to the center a couple of times.
Yeah.
And the work they do is amazing.
Great. So if we can imagine a time machine, like how would you say to the younger self to encourage?
I guess I would say that I guess I would say like everything takes time, you know, you just gotta try to live in the moment and take it one thing at a time, because when you try to get ahead of yourself with thinking too much, for example, it will just drive you crazy.
Yeah. How about you, Nee?
I agree with what Nya just said. You know, like even for myself, like it like take me a long time to actually like come out and open up with my family, my relative, and also to you know, taking more interview about my gender identity. Or even to younger people, just, you know, enjoy yourself, take time, and, you know, think about what you love, invest in yourself, and like with the right time, you know, your heart will tell you what to do.
That's great. And can you share a bit about how you both meet each other?
Yes, that's not nice. So when I first moved to Houston, I um, I only have my relationship here, and I was living with my aunt at her house. So I didn't have any friends outside that. And my language is wasn't that good at that time too. So I tried to find some app that I can make more friends in Houston. I found an app called Her. So it's actually a dating app for the LGBT community. Yeah, so after I download, so I just, you know, like looking for people who's currently living in my area. And I thought like I saw, yeah, profile. And, you know, it's like swipe left or right, you know, to like the people that you saw. Yeah, so I like her profile first. Or you like me first?
I thought I liked you.
Oh. So like I think like by that time, like yes, also using that app too. Right? Yeah. So yeah, so she liked me first and I like her back. And
Yeah, I think I messaged first.
Yeah.
And I just tried to make some small talk, and then eventually we went out for lunch, I think.
Yeah, for lunch. We
Yeah.
had a pho, like Vietnamese food pho. Yeah. That's our first date. And after that, we went right to the museum.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, that happened on our first date.
Yeah, that's happened in our first date. Visit museum in Houston.
See. And how long ago was that?
That was 4 years ago.
Yeah.
Almost 4 years.
Yeah, almost 4 years.
Wow. And what was your first impressions of each other at that time?
First impression. So I remember when we were just like texting, and I said like she like blue color. Yeah. So I remember. So when I just parked in the parking slot, right?
Mhm.
So I saw a blue car.
Mhm.
So yeah, I stepped out from that car. I remember she wore a blue like shirt, blue blouse,
Mhm.
and with a blue flip flop, and having a blue, uh, yeah, so like all blue. So I think that's my first impression that I know you like blue, but you know, like on set, from car to the outfit. So very impressive.
Yeah, she's not wearing blue today.
Not blue today.
Yeah. How about you, Nia? What was your first impression?
My first impression of me was that he was kind of quiet, honestly. I felt like when we were talking, he was a great listener, but I wanted there to be a little bit more talking.
Mm.
I guess I was probably nervous, so I think or at least I felt like I was talking more.
Yeah. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, I was quiet.
Right. So, you've always traveled to museums, like visited museums during your dates back then?
Yeah, we almost made it like um, a thing between the two of us to explore new museums because we both like to take pictures.
Mm.
Um, I think museums was a great way to kind of just spend time together and reflect and take pictures of the cool arts there.
Mhm.
So what other hobbies do you both share?
Eating, eating. Yeah, we
Yeah.
both like you know, like trying new foods. You know, support like local business, local restaurant, and yeah, at the weekend, if we not like busy with our schedule, we always like you know hang out and you know buy food to go or enjoy food at the restaurant. I
Mm.
think like you know sharing food with each other is our hobby.
Yeah, I definitely think sharing a meal, it lets you bond and get to know each other and have some good food.
Yeah.
So what are the places that you travel together?
We've traveled like to Austin, Dallas. We've also taken a couple of flights to Maryland, where my oldest sister lives. We've visited Washington, D.C. and all that. So we also like to travel together a lot because um, you see a good difference between all the museums located in different areas of the country and the kind of art that they portray. Um, I guess. Yeah. I guess we share a love of art as well.
Mhm.
Yeah.
So who are your favorite artists?
My favorite artist, I think um, recently I love Vincent Van Gogh.
Mm.
Yeah, Vincent Van Gogh, and I inspired by one of his artwork
Mm.
called Flower of the Sun painting.
Mm.
And from that inspiration, I actually made a gown and I competed in fashion fusion.
Mm.
Um, it's a fashion competition that's organized between Museum of Fine Art Houston and Houston Community College.
Mhm.
Yeah, so I got a lot of like inspiration from his love of flower, yeah, to my design.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, I remember there's a lot of kind of hybrid between fashion and art these days that people are wearing art, like artworks And a lot of museum shops are doing that too, which is, yeah, really interesting to see. Great. Um, so, what is your opinion on dating apps since it's been like a kind of a more and more mainstream culture these days among the like young people and the technology wise, it's definitely blending into every aspect of our lives. Like what do you see is the future of like relationships and people getting to know each other?
I personally think that like mm, getting to know people in person is a lot more valuable because you see their little quirks, you see their body language and the tone of voice. I
Mhm.
prefer that over dating apps. However, I think dating apps serve as a good like initial point of contact, kind of to maybe reach those people that you wouldn't normally reach in your daily activities.
Mhm.
So I think it's invaluable for that.
Mhm.
I think I agree with you, and also a little bit not agree. I agree with you that like meeting person, meeting new people in person is more valuable. It's
Mhm.
true because like you get to speak, you get to talk with them directly, and you can show your expression as well as like know their expression. So it makes the conversation is more exciting. But however, like I think dating apps is a very good way for you to be open to yourself for starting or meeting more people. Because like for me myself, I was and I think I'm still a shy person. I don't just walk out, see somebody and just come in and say hi. So I think like dating apps is a way to me to um, easier access to make more friends. So I think that's like 50-50.
If there's any like danger to like technology and dating apps, so would you say that might be sounding like one of the Black Mirror episodes?
I think, um, yeah, like even in Black Mirror, it shows the dark side of technology. I think with the benefits of dating apps and technology, I think there's always a drawback to it, and just not being able to see that person in real life. Sometimes people take advantage of that for whatever reason. So I guess that would be my drawback.
Yeah, because like in on the social media or in a lot of dating app, uh, there's a lot of like fake people, a lot of scam, and even a lot of people that is like underages. Like some people that's you the photo or picture is not them.
Mm-hmm.
So a lot of like fake information, and you just have to be really, really careful of what you see or what you about to explore.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Right. Do you see Vietnamese culture, like that cultural root, play a big part in your relationship?
I think so. Yeah, we share the same hobby is Vietnamese food. We have the same taste in food in what we love to share,
Mm-hmm.
and also in Vietnamese music,
Mm-hmm.
and also for us to communication in Vietnamese is very helpful for me, but also like like bonding us together,
Mm-hmm.
and yeah, also like be able to explain or like teach me word or in life things that I don't understand in English. So she'd be able to explain it in Vietnamese for me.
Mm.
I think that's a, you know, a big important in our relationship.
Mhm.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's something that bonds us a lot. Being like previously in a relationship with someone who wasn't of the same background as me, I think there were certain challenges there that I don't see here. So I think I'm grateful for that.
Great. Do you have any plans for the future together?
Plan. Oh, I have a lot of plans. You know, I think I'm a plan person.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I have a lot of plans to think of or to play with. So in the future, I beside of us like maybe definitely having a small house.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, yeah, I love kids. I love kids too, but you know I love to work a lot. So maybe like figure out my schedule
Mm-hmm.
to balance more with my work life and you know spend time with the family before we ready to have kids. So that's I think pretty much like our future plans.
Wow, sounds exciting. Yeah. Um, is there anything else that you guys would like to share?
No, I just wanted to say thank you for having us and asking us these questions. I think during our conversation, like I learned more about myself as well, and bring back those old memories about living in Vietnam and whatnot, and diving deeper into my roots.
Mm.
I really enjoyed it thinking about all of that.
Yeah, I'm also very like thankful for this interview. I think like for the LGBT community, you know, like this interview will reach more to people and get more people to understand about like the LGBT community.
Mm-hmm.
And you know, a lot of the more story is shared, you know, the more they say the value of our community to 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 help other people, you know. So yeah, very thankful for this interview.
So I want to thank you for so much for sharing all your stories and life experiences, especially having, yeah, like you to step up and help out in the COVID-19 pandemic as part of the, yeah, Asian American and as part of the LGBTQ community. And yeah, we're so lucky to have your time and be able to discover you through the front page of the Smart Magazine. Well,
Yeah.
yeah, very excited for